Hello everyone. I want to welcome you tonight. It's miserable weather and I'm so glad to see so many of you here. It's an important meeting. We are at the final stretch of conceptual designs for the Humarock road elevation and dune nourishment project. I just want to kind of note a few people in the room. Kevin Cafferty, our DPW director. Keith Jansen, and raise your hands and let him know you're here. He is the chair of the Coastal Advisory Commission. Chief Stewart from the police department, if you haven't already probably met him a few times. Maybe not all on good terms, I'm sure. Jason Bertner from CZM. Dan Smith. We're just introducing town staff and others who are here. Dan Smith is an engineer here with the town of Scituate. And I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Jason Rhodes.
Jason Rhodes, you're part of your police department. It's good to see everyone here. I'm very happy that you could come, knowing that this is one of those, Pat Galvin, who is the conservation agent for the town of Scituate, until the end of June. He is retiring and will be leaving us shortly, but will be staying on part-time, helping the town with their conservation issues. Thanks all for coming and being supportive. So how do we get here? And we know that this is kind of very close and personal to all of you because this is where you live. And we understand that. And we realize it's not easy. In fact, my stomach is a bit of a knot. I didn't sleep well either, and I am concerned, and I'm trying to do a good job for the residents down on Central Ave. So how did we get here? So in 2015, we applied and received a CZM grant for the Coastal Erosion and Sediment Transport Prioritization and Shoreline Assessment Study. That study kind of guided this opportunity that we have today. It did a study of a full range of protections for the entire shoreline of the town of Scituate. It was based on our coastal conditions and based on the options that were available and their likelihood of success, as well as the overall cost. And what I'd like to say is it's permittable and cost effective. And so the recommendations for Humarock was elevation of the roadway as well as a beach dune nourishment. So in 2016, I applied for another grant and received the grant from CZM for this part of the process that we are doing now, which is basically conceptual. So we're not down to engineering or to detail. We're kind of what I like to say, we're up at the 10,000 foot level looking down, trying to figure out how can we get this done. So we're not going to have maybe the details in this report or this study, but we'll have a closer view of what could possibly happen here. And as of yesterday, I finalized the 2017 grant application to keep the project moving forward for engineering and permitting. So that was, I literally drove that up to Boston yesterday and dropped it off. So the anticipation is that we hope that this will move forward with your support. The first study that I mentioned was $240,000. The conceptual design is $130,000. And the engineering and permitting for the project is $270,000, which was the grant I just applied for. So we're looking at well over $500,000. And we haven't really put a shovel to the ground. That's kind of how it works. These projects are very long term. They take a long time. So I received an email and said, maybe you don't want to elevate the road in the fall. We probably won't be elevating or doing anything in the fall because we don't have permits to do them. So it's going to take a while, not next fall, possibly the fall after that. Again, a long-term plan for this area to add protection to your homes and to the public infrastructure as well. A few residents asked me to answer a couple of questions off the cuff about easements, which we can all talk about later, but I said we have roughly 10% of the easement signed and notarized. 10 property owners have emailed questions to the town. 3 property owners have come to my office and asked questions, and 2 residents attended a Coastal Advisory Commission meeting that was held 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, on Tuesday night. As you know, in the handout that I mailed to all of you, a public project that's paid with public funds needs a public benefit as well, and that public benefit comes in the form of an easement. Those are the hardest things to ask for on my part, and it's the hardest thing to give as a homeowner, and I'm well aware of that. And I apologize for it, but I can't do anything about it. It's a requirement. Today is important that you listen with an open mind. This project can't move forward without your support. So I really hope that you begin to realize the benefits that will come to you through this project, and I hope that we can move it forward with the next grant round. I'm going to speak any longer, but I want to introduce John Ramsey. He is the principal engineer at Applied Coastal, and he has been working with us closely on this project. And I'd like to just talk a little bit about him before he gets up here, so people have an understanding of where he comes from and what he does. He has served as a project manager and our principal investigator for coastal embayment restoration projects, regional shoreline management plans, beach nourishment and coastal structure designs, estuary and water quality flushing studies, geotech engineering, hydrodynamic sediment transport evaluations, and papers related to littoral process analysis, and has employed innovative numerical methods, well-versed in modern analytical and numerical techniques for evaluating coastal estuarine salt marsh processes. In addition, he is responsible for oversight of engineering services at Applied Coastal. He has worked in Florida, Cape Cod, North Carolina, Louisiana, southeastern Massachusetts, as well as in Scituate and other places. So he comes with a breadth of experience, and we're lucky to work with him on this project. So, there you go. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Nancy. I'd like to actually first ask, because there seem to be a few more people here than last time, I was wondering if people could tell me, or at least raise your hands if you weren't here last time.
We're or we're not?
We're not. Okay, well, that's good. So, I mean, what I'd like to do, our last presentation that we did was a bit longer than tonight. I'm going to try to at least hit the highlights, and I'm sure that for those of you who weren't here last time, you may have some more questions, and I'm more than happy to answer them. But I did want to, try to not repeat a lot of what we did last time, but to try to touch on some of the issues that have come up since we met last time, and try to make sure that we're responding to some of the feedback that we got from the first public meeting. So this is the second public meeting, and it is on a project that is a combined project to elevate Central Avenue, but also to actually enhance the mixed sediment dune. And when I talk about mixed sediment, I'm talking about a combination of sand, gravel, and cobble. You guys who are out on Humarock, you know what your dune looks like, you know what comes across your road. We're not trying to put out a Bermuda sand beach. What we're trying to do is actually mimic what's there. There's a reason why that dune system works the way it does. It has become smaller in volume over time as it washes back into the salt marsh behind. So you really do need more volume to enhance the beach or enhance the whole barrier beach system. So what we're trying to do is really take advantage of nature and mimic that and try to return that to something that's a bit more stable. So that's sort of the concept behind some of this. But one of the things that I want to point out, and as I go through all of this, one of the reasons why this project has come up is what we're trying to do is deal with the public infrastructure issue, making sure that we have a safe travel along Central Avenue during some of the more, not the most severe storms, but some of the more severe storms, be able to have emergency access up to Fourth Cliff, but also understanding that we also have had a lot of property damage. I'll point out some of the FEMA repetitive loss claims, but I think all of you who live out there know that during the winter months that your houses have experienced, a lot of the houses out there have experienced quite a bit of damage. And so one of the things that this is trying to do, we talk about resiliency, one of the things we're trying to do is reduce that damage. And that's really the primary parts of this project. Making sure we have emergency access going on the roadway, and the other side of it is trying to reduce the damage not only to the homes, but also reduce damage to the roadway, making so you don't have to clear the roadway every time you have even a minor northeaster. So with that, I will at least move along. So the distance of the project we're talking about here, this is for North Humarock. There's someone behind you trying to get in. So we're going from 10 Cliff Road south to 130 Central Avenue. The reason why that stretch was chosen, it's sort of a stretch of Central Avenue that is relatively low-lying and kind of borders the two low-lying ends where we've seen the most repetitive loss damage as far as the FEMA claims. So that's the area we focused on from the start. So we had a bunch of steps that we've gone through. I presented this last time. We had a kickoff meeting way back when this grant started last fall, and we've been going through this whole initial engineering analysis to screen alternatives. It's one of the things that we want to make sure we did. We had the first public meeting, and then we've developed through that a conceptual design. I'm not going to be presenting the plans of the conceptual design tonight, but I will be presenting all the pieces of it. I didn't think trying to look at pseudo-engineering plans on the screen is really all that helpful. But I did want to make sure that all that information is there, give you guys an idea of what the cross-sections look like, what the dune would look like, and trying to get that scale, make sure that you have an understanding of that. So we're here now with the second public information meeting. That's what we're doing tonight. And we provided a handout, and I hope that everybody has a copy of the handout. I think the most important thing on here is the lovely table on the back, because everybody's going to look at that and focus on that. This is what we were talking about for elevating Central Avenue. So it has all of your addresses on it, I hope. And it actually talks about, are there more back there? I don't know if, so it talks about each of the addresses and how much the road would need to be raised, or at least the proposed raising of the road property by property. So you'll see that some of them are on the order of 3 feet, and some are even less than 1 foot. And it sort of depends on where your property is, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I did want to focus on this handout. And there's also a bunch of issues that came up at the first meeting, and hopefully some of the answers here provide some more information for everyone. Okay, so one of the ways I wanted to start this, because I didn't talk a bit much about this last time, or at least didn't visualize it. One of the issues we have is we certainly know that when we have a major storm, we get a lot of overwash here. Your picture on the right is after one of the more major storms, and this is after the road has been cleared. We obviously see the large piles of cobble that have overwashed the road. But I think some of the more interesting things are, if we look at even in the top left, where this was this past January. I mean, this was not much of a northeaster, but still we had material coming across the road. I mean, it's getting to the point now where even with minor northeast storms, we're actually getting material that is starting to clog the road. And then if you go back to 2013, maybe a more moderate northeaster, I think it was about a 5-year storm. You still get quite a bit of cobble across the road. So again, I just want to point out that this material is moving across the road, and the reason why is because the dune system out there, you guys, after you clear the road, some of it gets pushed back onto the dune, but again, that dune is much too small to actually provide much shore protection. So what ends up happening is when you have a minor northeast storm, the waves are big enough to actually start overtopping the dune, and as soon as they overtop the dune, that material just gets pushed across the road. And that all has to do with a beach can dissipate a lot of wave energy if it's a wide beach or a high dune system, but as it narrows and gets lower, basically it can't dissipate that wave energy. And so the beach fronting this whole stretch of North Humarock has lost so much volume over the years that really it doesn't have the ability to withstand these storms. If this beach were just a natural beach out in the eastern shore of Maryland or something, it would have migrated back and we would have just let that happen. because the volume of sand isn't disappearing, it just is moving back. And it is, in this case, going into the South River. Nancy's going to talk about the South River dredging project in a little bit. A lot of that material that's in the South River came over your beach, and there is an attempt to dredge that out and hopefully get a lot of that material back on the beach, which is where you want it. The material that's gone over in the overwash fans and is on the salt marsh in the back, unfortunately, the way the regulations work, etc., you're not able to take that. I mean, that's serving a purpose. You're supposed to allow material that does overwash. It's natural material. It's part of the wetlands regulations for the state. Basically, you need to allow that to naturally migrate. Once it gets in a navigation channel, like the South River dredging, you can dredge it and remove it. But as long as it's moving, in part of the barrier beach system, you're not allowed to take that out. The one exception is if it's on, Kevin lucky enough to when it gets on the roadway, he's able to take that material and put it back, at least on your properties, and obviously you guys do. I think historically the town had put some of that material out on the beach because of easement issues and public equipment use. A lot of it now is, he gets it off the road, but then it's really up to the homeowners to get it back out on the beach system. So, just giving you an idea, again, the big takeaway here is this system that you have is really just has too little volume to make this work. And so just a quick thing, this is something I pointed out last time. This is a repetitive loss map. The reason why the dots are huge is not to make them look really scary. It has more to do with privacy. FEMA doesn't like people to, this address got, had this claim, etc. What we're basically doing is just showing the number of claims of houses, and these red dots are homes that had repetitive loss damages. So that you've had more than, I think more than one claim over $5,000. So if you look up there, the no-name Northeaster, about $3 million in claims. The 78 storm, a lot of people weren't covered by FEMA, so you don't really have much damage, but I can guarantee if people were covered by FEMA back in 78, that would be by far the largest. That really is our storm of record. That is a storm that created a lot of the problems that you guys have, and you lost a lot of the volume of the system back in 78, and it's just been degraded ever since then. One thing I'd like to point out, if you move down the list, is that what I have is the return period of the storms. So that's when I talk about return period, that is, if it has a number 2, that's saying that storm is likely to occur once every 2 years. So that's a pretty minor storm. But we go down to some of these, basically we have Winter Storm Nemo, which is a 4-year storm, or Winter Storm Juno, which is this is why I need glasses, I can't see distance, and an 11-year storm. I mean, what we're looking at some major damage in some of these storms that really occur relatively frequently, and that seems to be happening more and more. We're not getting more higher storms. The smaller storms are just having more and more of an impact. So it's really something that is going to continue to occur as the volume of the beach gets smaller, and so it's just something that the town wanted to look at and make sure that we're dealing with. So Nancy pointed out that we had done a report before. This is the last year's report, and this was for the whole town, looking at prioritization. And one of the things that came up is that North Humarock was a really high priority area for obvious reasons, a lot of repetitive loss here. And we did look at a bunch of different options, and what we ended up doing is zeroing in on beach nourishment, constructed dunes, and elevate Central Avenue. All of those other options were looked at, and I am going to talk a little bit about some of them, because no matter how many times I said it in that report, it does keep coming back again. And I really do want to make sure, I'm not trying to kill anything, I'm just trying to get you to get an idea that we are, have tried to make the best attempt to do not only the most, resilient protection for this beach system, but also, even with the large numbers we're seeing, really the most cost effective. A lot of people have talked about hard structures and how they work. I do want to talk a little bit about that. Just in general, seawalls are great for holding the line. And that's in a perfect world. If we could hold the line everywhere and nothing else would happen, that would be great. Massachusetts has a really good long history of seawalls. We built a lot of them right after the Portland Gale back after 1898, and there's a ton of them still around. They've been increased in the 1930s, and then in the 1950s again when we had a whole series of northeasters, pretty severe northeasters through that time. A lot of the places you see them, Winthrop Beach, Revere Beach, both of those beaches have been nourished since that time. But more recently, you see Nantasket Beach, Crescent Beach in Hull. We have the series in North Scituate, Minot Beach. There's a whole series of these seawalls. Marshfield, the whole town of Marshfield, as far as I can tell. One long seawall. And obviously you guys have quite a few in the town of Scituate as well. I think the one thing to point out, when you have a seawall, your beach is going to continue to erode. You put the seawall in, and the beach, if you have erosion and your beach is moving landward, like North Humarock and most of the beaches in Massachusetts, the seawall doesn't stop the beach from eroding. So basically, if you look at the initial shoreline on the top there on the right, you have the beach width in front with the seawall. After the beach starts eroding, basically your beach just gets narrower back to the seawall. That's just what's going to happen. One thing it gets, when you get to that point, in all of these systems, and I think that north of Scituate Harbor is a really good example. When you lose all your beach in front of the seawall, it doesn't stop the water from going over the seawall. As a matter of fact, you have a lot of wave reflection off vertical structures, and the water goes right over. You get a lot of flooding, and actually you get a lot faster beach erosion because you get a lot of wave reflection off of the seawall. So your beach lowers more, you get higher waves against the seawall, and the water comes over the seawall. The town right now, and many towns in Massachusetts, are going through, at great expense, raising the seawalls, trying to put revetments in front of the seawalls, trying to expand the seawalls. These are not cheap things to do. It's gotten to the point where, because there's so much development right up against the seawalls that exist, we're looking at costs on the order of $7,000 or $8,000 per linear foot, which is a huge cost, and that's places that are already seawalled. That's replacing an existing seawall. So these are not cheap things to do, and they really don't deal with the issue. I mean, the issue is your beach is migrating, your beach wants to move. So really the only way that you can stop that beach from moving is to help it move back artificially by adding material. Another thing that has come up and has been talked about at quite some length is the concept of artificial reefs. I know there's been talk about WADS, which is just one technology. There's also reef balls. There's something called Coralox. That's actually a picture of Rebecca, so you get an idea of the scale. I have a little model of one here. But I mean, what you do is for these artificial reefs, you stack a lot of these together, kind of like jacks, and you just make a pile of them. And yes, I mean, any of these types of units can break waves. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that's something that's natural. Rocks can break waves. And as a matter of fact, a lot of these methods, rocks are some of the most effective way of breaking waves. I think that the critical thing here is this is not necessarily any sort of new technique. These are just different forms. We've now referred to them, a lot of them, as living shorelines because, especially the reef balls and the WADS, you'll see that they have holes in them. So if they're in the water, one of the reasons why they're called living shorelines is that you can actually get fish to swim in them and use them as habitat. So it's kind of a tricky way, and I'm not going to talk about the ecological aspects of these, but it's basically a tricky way of using a concrete structure to break waves and have an added benefit, which is fine. I mean, it's a good thing to do. But at the same time, it's not something we don't look at. It's not something we haven't worked with. As a matter of fact, I just designed a WADS project in Mississippi, in the right climate, where I have a very small tide range, in that case about a foot, in a place where I can have these stick out quite a bit out of the water, like you see on the left, and that's what they would look like probably about mid-tide over the Mississippi project. They can damp about 30% of the energy. And again, the type of energy I'm looking at is from pretty small waves in Mississippi Sound. So we're looking at waves that are 3 or 4 foot waves, not the type of waves that we look at out here, but they do a very nice job in more protected environments in areas where we have a relatively small tide range. And certainly they have a use in that case. One thing you'll notice, and I'd like to point out the one on the left, we don't see any of the other applications, but when you do these, because you're not building a solid structure like you do with a breakwater, like a rock breakwater, it's kind of like teeth. You end up putting in multiple rows to try to get as much wave attenuation as you can get. So you kind of design these, one row does maybe 5%, the next row might do an extra 3%, and so you just keep adding rows to try to get more and more wave attenuation. So they take a bigger footprint, and they require, obviously, more funding, et cetera. So it gives you an idea of the types of structures that are out there, but again, there's nothing magic. Specifically about WADs, because I know that they've come up quite a bit. As I said, that they work in a modest wave environment. I think the one thing to keep in mind is the scale of these structures. If you look at the man on the barge, these are, I believe, somewhere around 7 feet high. That's typical size of a WAD, which is fine. And again, in that small wave environment, they work pretty well. It's a breakwater type structure. Certainly, as long as the bottom stays stable and they don't sink, they can actually provide some decent wave attenuation. I think one of the reasons why when we looked at things, and within the whole context of our study, we actually looked at offshore breakwaters, we looked at a lot of different things. But one of the reasons why we didn't think that something like WADs or reef balls would work, and maybe I should come over here for a second, is this is what our beach profile looks like. This is actually a true scale beach profile. So this is the shoreline. This is one of your house decks. This is 0 is about mean sea level, this line here. And so you have a relatively shallow flat going offshore. If you want to put WADs, you can put WADs anywhere along here. The further up you put them, the drier they are, and they don't really serve the benefit of living shorelines at that point because they're not underwater ever. So one of the things we did is just show what one WAD would look like, or it could be a reef ball, if you put it out basically somewhere out near mean low water. So again, this would be an intertidal thing. It would be sticking completely out of the water. At low water, at high water, it would be just a couple feet of it showing. And then anytime you got storm surge, it would be completely underwater. And when I'll show you another slide as we're kind of going through this, but as the water level goes up, this attenuates less and less wave energy. So more and more wave energy gets through. So the biggest problem that we're dealing with here is during the northeasters is where your water level is. And this is when they're least effective. They're more effective down when you're down at low tide. But again, if we're looking at a structure like this, it's basically not serving much as fisheries habitat because it's, when low tide comes, fish gotta leave else they die. And the other thing is we're looking at structures 12 to 14 feet high. As I said, point out the WADs are about 7 feet high. This is a structure that's twice as high, which would be 4 times as large. And as far as I'm understanding, any of the WADs or reef balls, this is far beyond anything that they've actually constructed. And again, you need multiple rows of these in order to get some good wave attenuation. So really, when we started looking at this, and right now we're doing a project for the Division of Marine Fisheries, looking at offshore reefs for these exact type purposes. One of the things that for that we're trying to restore eelgrass. We've been looking at a lot of different options on what you can and can't do as far as wave attenuation. And one of the things that they're struggling with us is that if you put something offshore, if you want a shore protection benefit, the size of the structure becomes so large that it really defeats the purpose and the cost of trying to do it. And so as an engineer, I have to show plots like this. It does get a little confusing. But what I want to point out here is, so this transmission coefficient. This is how much energy gets through. And this is how much of the structure is showing. So for the structure, if this number is 0, this line here, basically the structure, the top of the structure is right at the water surface. Okay? So it's a traditional rock breakwater. That's damping, getting rid of about half the wave energy. If I'm looking at some of these WAD breakwaters, this is from a paper in 2012 by Scott Douglas, only about 70 or about 30% of the energy is being damped if the structure is sitting right at the water surface. If I get down here, where the structure is underwater, I'm getting to the point where, I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way. So if I'm getting underwater, I'm getting to the point where 90% of the wave energy is getting through. So that's the problem with these structures, is that if any of these structures, it doesn't matter if they're a rock breakwater or a WAD, depending on how many rows you use, basically what it comes down to is once it gets submerged, you really aren't getting rid of much of the wave energy. So that wave energy is getting through, and it really isn't creating what you really want to do. And I think the critical issue is here is when you are most critically in need of shore protection is when your water level's high, when your waves are high, and that's when these are the least effective, unfortunately. So the only way to make them effective would be to basically have them on your beach. So one of the things I wanted to do was talk a little bit about what we discussed in the last meeting. And again, so I didn't go through a bunch of slides from this. Basically, we came up with the beach nourishment. Regular beach nourishment is not recommended. And we recommended it initially in our earlier report, and this is sand nourishment along the length of the beach. And the reason why it's not recommended is in order to do this and have it work, we would need to do a project that's larger scale, not just for North Humarock, would have to extend much further south. And so we decided that at that point from the first public meeting that we really didn't want to focus on that, but rather we would focus on dunes, which is the other recommendation, and then also talking about raising Central Avenue. The reason why I talk about both of those is they kind of go hand in hand. The critical thing about the constructed dunes is that what the constructed dunes are trying to do is they're trying to prevent the overwash from happening in the first place. So what we're trying to do is construct a dune large enough so that waves that are coming and attacking the shoreline are not overtopping your dune, not pushing material onto Central Avenue. So that is stopping the water from the ocean side from getting to Central Avenue. On the other side is elevating Central Avenue. So the concept is if this is working, then Central Avenue is staying quote-unquote dry as long as the still water elevation doesn't come up too high. I'm going to show in a few minutes how low the Central Ave is, and I think you guys all know that Central Ave has some very low locations. So what we're trying to do is just elevate the roadway so that it can't flood from the backside. So that's what the purpose of this is. It's not trying to stop anything coming over from the front side. It's actually trying to stop South River from flooding from the backside. So that's why you need to do both things. So we're trying to keep the water from going over the dunes, and then trying to keep the water on the backside from going over the road. So the first thing is the overwash protection. So one of the things we're looking at is we're trying to get an idea of what this dune looks like. This is a very large scale dune. It's up about 19 feet, and one of the questions that came up from the last meeting was about will I be able to see over the dune? And I will talk about that in a few minutes, so don't get ahead of me. So obviously your dune is not at that elevation now. Your dune is relatively low. You can see the overwash coming over it. And this is on the backside. We're looking at this elevation, water elevation, at this point 6.5 feet. Your regular high tide is about 5. So this is really only about 1.5 feet of surge, and you're already almost over that section of roadway. So it really doesn't take much. And again, that's backside flooding, not coming from the front side. So one of the things, it doesn't take much for us to get overtopping over there. So again, so what we're really trying to do is get that road up around 10 feet, rather than, in this case, this area is probably about 7. So we're trying to get it up about 10 feet so that when we have a 100-year storm, assuming that dune is working, when we get a 100-year storm, we're still able to drive down that road and get emergency vehicles down it. And this dune has enough volume to prevent the overtopping of waves coming from the front side during that storm. So that's the concept, and that's what we're moving forward with. So how did we get the dune design? A lot of this comes from the basic rule as a start is that over time the National Academy of Sciences came up with a quick rule of thumb, and we've looked at run-up calculations as well. But a quick rule of thumb, just for everyone's edification here, is that if you have more than 540 square feet of dune per linear foot above the 100-year still water elevation, that dune will not disappear during a 100-year storm. It's going to get eroded, but it will survive. And so if you have greater than that volume, that's really what you're targeting to make sure that you can survive a major storm. Right now, you guys are looking at about 10% of that volume. So you guys are really have a very low volume dune in most cases. So one of the things we're trying to do is increase that volume and increase the height. And then with Central Avenue, this is kind of the profile. This is, again, this is vertically exaggerated. I talked about this last time. It may get confusing because it is vertically exaggerated, but if I showed it in true scale, it would look like a billiard table. So I'm trying to exaggerate the vertical scale. So this is 6 feet up to 12 feet, and this is, mean high water, mean high tide is 5 feet. So this is, so part of your roadway gets about 6.5. And you've got some spots here that are down below 7 or right around 7 feet. And this is, again, this is going from the south end all the way up north. And get an idea of the different street locations of where we are. And this is actually the elevation of the road. It looks flatter than that, but again, this is vertically exaggerated. And what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to raise the road elevation so that it's basically at 10 or a little bit over for the whole distance. So this is our proposed elevating of the road. And so if you go to that table that's on the back of the handout, you'll get an idea, depending on where your address is, how much elevation we're looking at your particular location along Central Avenue. The one thing to point out is there's a bunch of initials next to the properties. In just a second. There's a bunch of initials, A, B, C, D, and that's the type of driveway connection will be required, and I'll talk about those in a minute. That will be in our report, but it was hard to explain that in a one-page handout. But those are the types of how difficult the driveway would be to connect depending on the actual elevation of your particular property. But again, I will talk about those examples in just a minute. Do you have a question?
I just wanted to point out, the photo that you had shown of where the flooding was on the riverside, that Jason Berger had taken, I just want to make you aware, that was at 97 Central Ave, and this is at 128. So that photo was much further south.
Which is fine, but it's not really relevant because you see how low your roadway elevation is, and the high tide that day was at about 6.5 feet. So you're looking at, in this area, this part of the roadway might have even been underwater at that point.
But it's that way.
I understand, but again, the elevation, the water elevation we're talking about was 6.5 feet. So I'm sure that Jason couldn't get down here is one of the reasons why I didn't take a picture of it down here. So that always ends up kind of being the issue too. Go ahead.
There were several spots, including a spot across from us, that at a normal flood tide, forget a storm and a normal flood tide, the water on the river is coming onto the street. I know you're talking about at the bend of the road. There's a picture you made reference to. But the first picture you had up here in the top left corner when you first showed 4 or 5 pictures, that was right about where we are. And I suspect it comes out down near the cliff also, but forget a storm, that river is coming onto the road at a flood tide. Right, and I think, this is actually the center line of the road, so obviously some of the road has pitch on the side, so there's no doubt, we've seen it. I mean, I've been there when the water was right up against the road, so I'm aware that, and the only thing I'm trying to point out is that this road is so low in so many locations that really it needs something. What we're trying to do, this is kind of the gold standard. What we're trying to do is actually get it up to an elevation where when you have that really major coastal storm, assuming the dune is holding, that you're able to actually drive down this road at almost the peak of storm surge and get down the road. And that really is the concept. So you're thinking that the elevation protects us from the river, which doesn't really have too much force. Doesn't have much force. And the dune is intended to stop serious force from coming. And actually, it will stop, it's not going to stop the 91 northeaster, but it is going to stop all these 10 to 15 year return period storms. The one thing is, and I can get into this maybe at the end, is that because this is not like a vegetated dune, this is something that can be manipulated, kind of like is being done up at Man Hill Beach, where if it gets, deformed or something after a storm, you just put it back to the same grade and return this to actually a storm protection berm. That's the purpose of this. Without new permits? Without new permits. With an ongoing Conservation Commission permit that would allow maintenance. And the town's been doing that at Man Hill pretty effectively, and it works just fine after a storm. So you can talk to Kevin about that. So this is just a quick cross section. This is the only engineering plan I'm going to show, I think. So it just gives an idea of kind of the concept of what we're doing here.
And again, I don't want people to get caught up, like your house is here, and this 3-1 grade. There are going to be driveway connections, but this is just kind of the concept of the road and that it would be elevated, and just give you an idea of the type of fill. And obviously utilities and some other things would need to be dealt with, as well as some of the more private home issues. So what I wanted to do briefly, and again, I know there's going to be a million questions about this, was go through, do you have a general question or do you have a specific?
If your dune works, very little water comes from the river onto Central Ave. All the problem is overlapping, where the houses are on pilings and no seawall. I get photographs that can prove that. I've been in Humarock for a long time.
Right.
And it's the wash over. At 1978, we had a meeting at the high school. Jack Kavanaugh, the head engineer for the state, said, what is saving Humarock is seawalls and houses with foundations. And he was the head engineer for the state. And he's right. And I've been there for 60 years.
I'm not quite sure what to say, so I'm going to just let that one go, okay? What I'd like to do is just go through the, actually maybe I will address that because I did hear that comment. He isn't right, okay? And no, I'm not trying to create a controversy here. One of the things that you have to realize is this barrier beach wants to migrate landward. So you can let it, or you can try to fix it, okay? And you can try to put that seawall in. I can tell you that Winthrop just spent $22 million to put in a beach nourishment because their seawall was basically falling into the water. And before that seawall fell into the water, or was about to fall in the water, they were having tremendous overwash and incredible, they have 4,000 homes that are in the flood zone on the landward side of the seawall. The seawall is the highest point of land in all of Winthrop on that beach. So what ends up happening is when that seawall was just about to go, all that water is coming over the seawall and rushing down those side streets. That area was a complete disaster as far as FEMA goes, and that is a seawall that had been built in 1898. So yes, you can try to do that, and in 20 years, another engineer is going to be up here and saying, that was a really big mistake. But you can do it. And I have done it. I am in the process of actually going through getting the Crescent Beach seawall reconstructed up in Hull. There are places where really that is the only thing that we can do. There's really nowhere for anybody to do anything. It's got an existing seawall. I'm sort of stuck with what's there. And I really can't put down any sort of beach nourishment because of all the fisheries habitat that is there. So we can do that. We can try to continue to build seawalls. But again, over time, and I think in Scituate especially, you're seeing a lot of money and more money every year going into rebuilding revetments and seawalls because it is something that is getting to the point where your beaches have pretty much disappeared. In Humarock, you still have a beach. You have still something to work with.
Excuse me, sir. I have a question. I'm at the most northern end
Okay.
of your 130 hours, whatever. I have a seawall. During storms, I don't get stone on my driveway. The river across does not come on the street. But in this, you have me going up 2.5 feet, when in fact I have no problem. So if I go up 2.5 feet, the roadway in front of my house, which I don't get stone, and we're in a stretch of about 6 homes that have seawalls, and you don't get the slowness down the street. Now, to continue, my question is, there's homes like 10 down that are very high on islands. Now, this proposed wall, is it, to protect their house, is this wall going to be like 20 feet at their place and 6 feet at my place?
The wall, the dune?
The dune.
Okay. It's going to be the same height everywhere.
So it's going to be the same height all the way down?
Yes.
So in this report, it says that you won't be able to see the ocean standing on your deck.
That's not what it says.
Well, if you're short, you won't be.
What's that?
If you're short, you won't be. It says standing, you will be able to see.
Correct.
But the houses that are on pilings, they'll be able to see.
I'm sure some will and some won't, yes.
So there's a degree of severity that it's going to cost.
Let me go through this, and I think that maybe as we go through, I think some of those issues will be addressed, okay, and some of them won't be. I mean, I mean, you know, I'm going to be honest with you, I mean, it's not going to be perfect for everyone. I think one of the things that I think people should be aware of, there are people here, there are plenty of people here who have seawalls, and there are plenty of people here who don't. I think one of the things that you're seeing is that the stretches of seawalls generally deflect the energy so that the areas that don't have seawalls is where the overtopping is happening. And so that redirection of wave energy is something that is actually kind of creating more difficult flooding situations for those people who don't have seawalls right now.
So if the wall is above my deck, and it's a solid wall, for me to get to the beach, I have to get in my car and drive down to the beach.
It's not a wall, it's a dune. I mean,
Well, it's a dune, but it's a solid. Are we going to have boat crews like for the piers down?
let me get through this, okay? When we finish the presentation, and then if people have questions, we can answer them. So on the table, you have letters of different types of properties. And if you look at the addresses here, we have 41 homes where basically the homes are elevated, as you pointed out, on piles. And in those cases, you know, obviously the homes are high, we don't have any foundation issues. And so what we anticipate is that if the road comes up, your driveway would be built at the same elevation of the road. So there would be fill put in, something like this, where so if the roadway is here, this is the roadway, your driveway to your home, or your fill would be put in to the home. So basically, you just have fewer steps to walk up to get into your house. Does that make sense to everybody?
The ones with the red dots,
The ones with the red dots are those addresses.
is that?
Okay, so this is and the letter is on the table that you have. So if you have the table, you see where your home is. So this is section B. So these homes are non-elevated homes, and they're on the east side of the road. And again, because of the elevation of the house, you know, we're able to, or the elevation of the land, we're able to actually taper this in so it's flat. So again, you have no divot or anything. You're basically flat. And that is...
Did you show two charts there? Because I thought you showed one.
Yeah, I showed one earlier with the elevated homes.
And then, what, could you go back to that chart there? Yeah, now is that, you got some numbers down there by Atlantic Ave. I'm on 168. What is that chart telling?
You're not 168, it's not on there. Do you have the table?
Yeah, I got an E. I get,
No, it's 160, 162, 172.
I think it's confusing because you use red dots on both of them. So this is the elevated house with the red dots. The other one was not, correct?
What other one?
This one has red dots. You're saying these are the elevated houses, correct?
So this picture is
The
home.
red dots, these are your addresses, okay? These are addresses of this specific section A. Do you say section A?
yeah.
So if you have an A next to your house on that table,
Yeah.
then you would be one of these red dots. You have an E, okay? So it's not you. I'll get them,
Look
okay?
on the handout, on the back page of the handout that looks like this, and it's a broad table.
Yeah, we understand, we don't know what the, what is there.
Absolutely.
Well, that's why I got to go through them all in order for us to understand.
Okay.
So this is an easy case. It's an elevated home. Okay, so we have an easy case here. It's an elevated home, so we can, if we're raising the road, regardless of how much we raise the road, we can just do a flat driveway right to this house. And all that's going to do to the person who's living there is that you'll have one or two less steps to walk up to get to your house. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. We'll move on. Okay, so B, these are addresses yet again. So this is 22 different homes. These are non-elevated homes, but the homes are up at an elevation that is higher than what we're planning on raising the road to. So if we raise the road, you can actually have a level driveway right to your house, and it's not going to slope towards your house. It's going to be flat or slightly uphill. Does that make sense? Okay. Number C, these are non-elevated homes, again, on the east side, and they do have a sloped driveway, which means that the elevation of the home, the bottom of the foundation of the home, is actually slightly lower than what we're proposing to raise the road to. And one thing I want to point out before, because everybody's looking at, okay, that means I need to get drainage water out. But the issue here is that if we're putting the road up high and preventing the river from coming in, and this dune is preventing the overwash from happening, really you don't need the level of protection of water ponding, because it's only going to be rainwater that's hitting there. It's not going to be overwash, it's coming over the way it does now. So again, this is a slope, and these are relatively flat slopes, but again, this house elevation is slightly lower than the edge of pavement, as it's proposed. So again, we have, how many homes? We have 19 homes in this condition, and you see the addresses. Most of them are down in the southern area, and we do have a few up a little further north. So this is, obviously, you guys know that your homes are on solid foundations, and they're very close to the road. So it is a challenging situation for us. But these are these are some of the problems that we're dealing with. And then we have 6 homes on the west side of the road. And at first I was thinking that these were going to be very problematic, but actually all of these homes are actually higher than the elevation of the roadway that's planned there. So none of those homes are a problem. However, the one thing I will say is there's some actually nice driveways over there, so if there's some filling of those driveways, it needs to be thought about. But again, all those homes, the foundations are all higher than the proposed roadway elevation that we're aiming at, because the road actually goes up there a little bit.
Are the elevations of the driveways figured into the cost of the project, or is the homeowner going to have to pay?
The homeowner's not going to have to pay for it, but it is not worked into the budget yet. So that's something that needs to be into the final engineering that would need to be done.
My other question is the dune going to alter any semblance of a beach on the ocean side?
I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Let me get to that, okay? Because I know that is one question that's come up. And so this is probably the most challenging thing for us. There's 3 homes, obviously all in the south end here, where we have actually a steeper slope driveway. And it's just something that we just need to work out from an engineering standpoint. Hang on a second. Let me get through the A through E so that I'm at least there. And so this is kind of a larger grade going down. And so this is something we have to look at, and it's something that's difficult to engineer. We may have to not elevate the roadway as much in that area. It's possible we may have to come down a little bit so that we can work with those grades. But these are our most challenging issues, are those 3 homes right here. Okay? Sorry. Okay, if you let me get through the presentation, can we do that, or would it?
What is this going to do to our septic systems?
Can we get through this? Those questions are something that's better to answer at the end.
And also it'll be higher than my basement, the 3 feet. What do I do there?
Can we wait till the end? Can we wait till the end and let me finish? So one of the questions that had come up earlier is how this is going to perform. So one of the things we keep showing things is an exaggerated vertical scale, because it's easier as an engineer to show that. But I did want to stretch this out to actually the full scale. So this is actually the scale of what it would look like. This is the top of your typical deck, somewhere around 16 feet. Most of the houses, this is what the dune would look like. So it's a 3-to-1 slope on the back. So and so when you're asking whether you can cross this dune, this really is not a very steep slope. You go up and over and down. One thing I do want to point out is when storms do hit these, what they do, they're going to resort it. And so they are going to kick up this crest. That's the way these things work. And as I said, that because this is an engineered dune, you can reshape it. So if you get a really bad winter storm, this is what's going to happen. It's going to kick it up higher because that's what a natural dune system would do. You can level that back down to this elevation and that volume and keep that elevation, but that is what it's going to want to do. What it's going to look like down near the water. We're talking about a mixed sediment nourishment. So right now, when you see the stuff going across your road, it's all cobbles. You still have sand on your beach. So what we're planning on nourishing with is sand and cobbles and gravel. Just the same thing, it's on a native beach. Samples were taken. And so what's going to happen, you put that material down, it's going to take a while to sort out, but generally the cobbles all end up in the upper part. That's just the way it is. And then you get this slope coming down that is also pretty cobbly and gravelly. And then as you get into this flat part, it gets sandier. Is it going to be any sandier than you have now? No. I mean, it's obviously going to mix in with what's there, but this is going to be a sand gravel beach. You know, more sandy as you get down towards the water like you do now, and more gravelly and cobbly at the upper end. It is, you know, I can't pre-sort that when we're placing it. It's just too painful. But, you know, one of the things they found out at Winthrop, and I know people have brought up pictures of that, when that material was placed, the cobble came in last. So the first year, everybody was complaining. Now you have Cobble Ridge, and you got a sandy beach. But when we first put it out there, it looked like a lot of cobble. So it is something that nature has to sort out. I think that you know, depending on where you put the cobble, when you bring that in, it can certainly be done in a way where you're putting the cobble up in this area first is probably a smarter move. Wow, I'm really going slow. I did want to talk about this because, again, it's one of these issues that keeps coming up, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands. Everybody says beach nourishment doesn't work, dune nourishment doesn't work. We tried it after you know, the storms in '91. This is a 1994 project. This is not what we're talking about. Okay, so in 1994, they had a design that was somewhere around you know, 10 cubic yards per linear foot. We're looking at somewhere around 50. So we're looking at something that's at least 5 times as large volume-wise per linear foot. And this is, you know, this disappeared very quickly. It was not the material that was compatible. I mean, you look at your beach, you see what it looks like. This is your native beach. This stuff is fine sand. It disappeared like in the first time there was a storm. Not a surprise, but it's not that beach nourishment doesn't work. It's the way this project was done and designed and tried to push through very rapidly and not really well thought through is the reason why it didn't work. So, you know, this is not, you know, if they'd gone just through design guidance, they would have realized that would have never worked. It's not like the design guidance has changed since 1994 that much. It really just was not thought through.
John, can you say redistributed, please, instead of gone?
Okay, it's not gone, it was redistributed. That's Rebecca Haney from CZM. She's right. It didn't disappear, it moved downrift. Okay, so the people of Marshfield, thank you. So that's really just the way that it works out. Is that okay?
I agree.
And actually, Green Harbor probably had to be dredged 3 times after they put that in. I'm just teasing you. I can't resist. So the other thing is one of the things we did is we looked at the dune. So one of the things we're trying to do is replicate the dune. And this is just one of the many shots. But this is, for those, I know a bunch of you may not be down there year-round and maybe they're more in the summer. Your beach is definitely sandier in the summer than it is in the winter. I can tell you that just from the limited experience I have here, but certainly I've been out to Humarock many times. So, this is more of a winter-type picture. Your beach definitely gets a lot coarser. But one of the things is you end up in the dune system. We're looking at something, and this is, kind of where we're looking at kind of pebbles up to cobble. So about 80% of your material is pebbles and cobble, 20% is sand, and that's in your dune, the way it is now. So as you go out further offshore, this curve will pop up and maybe be 50-50. But it really is, your native beach is not a true sand beach. It's certainly a mix of a lot of different sediment types. So, basically I just want to, again, this is just kind of pointing out that, kind of difference over time. But again, this is, after this is done, when you get down in this area, you're going to have that look, that that gravelly sand, gravelly sand, gravelly sand. That's the way your beach is going to look. That's the material we're talking about bringing in. So in the summer, it's going to be a little sandier. In the winter, it's going to be colder. It's just the way, you know, nature likes to move the material around.
Where do they get material like that?
So there's a couple of places. Right now, the primary source is in Carver. So it's a lot of the Makepeace has a lot of material that they excavate, and they actually have sediments that are rounded, you know, rounded stone already. So now we don't bring in sharp gravel or anything. It's already pre-rounded material.
Has this been done other places, and do you have pictures of it?
Probably it's been done a lot on the West Coast. It's done a lot in England. Probably the best example around here is Winthrop Beach.
If you don't have any comparisons.
I can. Yeah. What's that?
I have photos of it, and there's no sand in it. It's all beach.
I would suggest if you're interested in Winthrop Beach, rather than taking a report that you got off the internet, go visit it. Take a look. Okay, because it's not, you know, it's pictures, and I'm aware that people have been talking about a peer review. I designed the project, so there had a peer review done, and as all that peer review was talking about is that there was a concern there that the material was coarser than what the native material was, and as all the peer review basically said, it showed pictures before we did the nourishment and after, and it looks exactly the same. So, you know, the type of material there is coarser than it is here. So the material we brought in was coarser than it is here. So it's not any real surprise that beach is a bit different. But again, what you do if you go there at low tide, and you'll see that same transition. You're going to see the coarse cobbly ridge up top, and you're going to see transition into that sandier material down low. And again, it depends on what you bring in and whether it's compatible with the beach. If it's compatible with the beach, it will look like the beach does now. And if it's not, then it won't. Okay? So again, the question is view over the dunes. So what we tried to do is take a couple of locations. This is just an example of 300 Central Avenue, so you talked about the people who are lucky enough to be way up on piles. So yes, if you're standing there, you're going to be able to see over the dune quite easily. And because of where the dune is placed, it's actually a little bit in front of those houses, so it's a little bit further distance. As you go up a little bit further south, 284 Central Avenue, where you have the solid, more seawall type decks, you're looking at, you know, again, that's a 5-foot line, so you're looking at, that's your view. So again, that's really the view from down here, not from up here. So that's your view from standing on the concrete. We don't have, you know, the LiDAR from. And again, this is another area, 196, where again, when we looked at this, our concern would be that the dune is going to be, very disruptive to an area like this, but actually the elevation of the homes is very similar to the last piece where you do have the decks. People had asked last time about discussion of project phasing, whether phasing is a potential option. The town has sort of discussed this internally a little bit. There's discussion about, obviously the one major concern that came out of the previous report was the concern about a potential breach where the beach is the lowest. That's where some of the initial work was talked about for making sure that the South River sediments go out there to try to protect that area. From 10 Cliff Road to 242 Central Avenue. So we're looking at that as a potentially first phase of the project. And again, that would just raise that last section. And again, that last section has probably some of the fewest problems as far as driveway connections and any of those issues, because the homes are either elevated or not too close to the road. And just a quick thing on cost. So right now, that's just the roadway cost. That does not include the driveways, as you had asked. But we know that there's going to be, certainly be an allowance for those types of things. If we did the whole project, it's about $8.5 million. And then if we look at the phase one, you're looking at $3.6 million. And we have not gone into the detailed analysis of allowances, but certainly the question came about septic systems. Obviously, one of the things, your septic system is not a problem other than making sure you get some sort of riser so that you don't have to dig down 3 feet to get it. If you have somebody mentioned they have a septic system on the seaward side of their seawall, I'm not quite sure what to do about that because I don't know how that would pass Title V and whether it be an acceptable septic system, but that's kind of an outlier. So if I don't know who that was, but if there's anybody who has a septic system in that situation, that would be like built under the dune after we've constructed it, that is a problem. But I think that septic system should probably fail anyways and probably be replaced. And I don't know if there's any others. And other than that, I think that's it on that slide. And then just to give you an idea, Nancy talked about that there was a grant applied for. Permitting of any type of large public project like this is quite cumbersome. So these are just kind of a list of all the permits that are likely going to be, or that will be required for this. This project actually extends, the initial stuff extends into the water, so you need all of these permits. So obviously the challenge is project funding. This is not a cheap project. You saw the numbers. Public buy-in, that's what we're here for. I'm not somebody who's going to act as a proponent. This is the most wonderful project in the world. This is up to you guys. This is a large public commitment project, which goes along with signing of easements. As Nancy pointed out, this is a publicly, if the project goes forward as a publicly funded project, it's public funds, basically being put on private property. It requires by law a public access easement. It's just the way that the state stuff works. You can't spend public funds without getting those easements. So obviously, a lot of those issues, and those are the concerns, and I believe me, if I were a homeowner here, that's what I would be, always one of the concerns I'd have. But at the same time, this is, the town is trying to move forward with something that is protecting their infrastructure, but it also serves to protect the homes in the long term for North Humarock. So I think that's all I have, and I'm happy to answer questions. So the next step, Nancy is probably going to talk a little bit about easements, but obviously the team easements, you talked about that a little bit. But and again, it's just funding issues as far as moving forward with permitting and engineering. Go ahead.
Are there any plans for the Scituate? Because that I've lived there during major storms, and that's where the ocean comes over. It comes right down Seaview Ave onto Central Ave, and then it rolls down towards our house, south. Seaview Ave is a street that goes up to the land.
Right, so the dune goes all the way across in front of that area. So Seaview Ave, that is where where the dune goes across. So yes, the dune would be in front of that.
The dune would be there, but is there the elevation of the Seaview Ave too?
The Seaview Ave homes?
No.
No, because that road is actually up quite a bit from Central Ave, so it's still higher. So there shouldn't be a problem. Again, as long as the dune's out in front of it, that's not a...
What about Atlantic Ave? Is that been a problem?
It is. I mean, it's a problem because the dune's not big enough. And so as long as the dune's out in front of it, the dune's big enough, and then you don't get that overwash that comes down to Central Ave. Really, and the reason why we're focused on Central Ave, it's really the emergency access.
Well, Seaview Ave is our right of way to the beach.
Right.
Is this dune, are we ever able to get over it?
You'll be able to get over it. I think the one thing that I will point out is if this ends up being a very cobbly dune, one of the things that, when you can have, roll-out mat walkways that go across, it's not going to be that steep that it's very difficult to get over. It's just something that if it gets very cobbly, and I would think even now, some of the times when you walk to the beach, it's a bit cobbly. There's nothing, especially if you're well above the high tide line, having a portion of it just have a roll-out mat across it would actually probably make it better than it might be now.
Is this project going to require 100% participation as far as the easements?
I would probably say yes. I mean, I think that's, if there's if there are holdouts, I don't know how the town would deal with that. It's one of the things, it's not like you can build, I would hate to be that person that has the gap in the dune. But I think that's, I don't answer for the town.
Yeah, so 100% would be what we would be looking for because we're phasing this project in. And as you saw in the presentation, we would go to that north end first because that is the area that is most vulnerable. If that breaches, then what? Then what do we do if it
Do you
breaches?
see 100% participation as being possible?
I see it as a challenge, but it is a big challenge, and I understand why it's a big challenge, but I think through having public and thoughtful conversations that we can reach that goal. So yes, but again, it's going to be phased in. And what will we do if that area should breach? I'm pretty sure that's my phone. I'm sorry.
Now, we have to sign the easement before it goes in front of the town meeting, is that correct? What happens if the West Enders say no, they don't, who wants to pay more taxes than they're already paying? So what happens then? Do we get our easement back?
I think the easement only goes into effect if the project goes into effect. So if the project doesn't go into effect, your easement is meaningless. It's only if this project is done.
We get the easement back.
I don't think you necessarily get it back, it just doesn't go into effect. I mean, the easement would have a condition in it that the project needs to be done. If the project's not done, your easement is not valid. Does that make sense?
Well, I think there's some confusion as to what this easement means. This easement, am I wrong, simply means that you have access to the property to, or near it to do this, and secondly, that the public is going to have, the general public has got some right to go on that beach. But, I mean, they're not going to walk 2 miles from the center of town all the way down. I think the easement is not a question of, the easement, is he referring to?
You're right. You have it. The way you're saying it is exactly right.
Right, so
But you're not talking about the homeowners paying money and in the sense of them doing something specifically for you. The easement is allowing the public, which they can do now. I mean, you can't really stop people from walking that beach.
Yeah, that's what I don't understand. It's a semi-private beach. It's always been that. We've never had the right to stop anybody walking up and down.
I think the difference in this easement, and just to be clear, probably the biggest difference is that if somebody decides to sit on your beach after they're tired, they have that right, which they technically do not now. They have strolling rights right now under, that people just do between mean high water and mean low. They have strolling rights, but this would actually give them the right to sit on your beach because...
They don't have parking rights.
And they do no parking rights. There's nothing...
On the easement, it says at the end, do the normal beach thing, which we picnic, party, and have a good time.
no. So you would not be able to pass between the structures. The only way to be accessible to the beach is there's one small area to the very far north, which there is no parking, and then the public beach, which is at the bridge, where there's parking. Those are the only two places that are accessible. They will not be allowed through this easement to pass through your property to get to the beach. And if that should happen, then that's a problem.
CUF would be access to the beach.
I don't know that is CBU Ave at the end of CBU Ave?
Yeah, there's no lot at the end of CVU Ave, right.
Okay,
so-
well then I guess at the end of CBU Ave. But they'd still have to park somewhere.
But
When we did the beach nourishment, why didn't we have to do this? Get the easement?
Go ahead.
A lot of our deeds read, we own to mean low tide,
Exactly.
okay? If somebody is walking on the beach, okay, we assign the easement. If they fall, cut themselves, an ambulance has to come. Whose responsibility is it? The town of Scituate or the homeowners?
The person who fell.
No.
Section 17C in the Mass General Laws, if it's open space and accessible to the public and you don't charge, then you don't have the liability associated. It's the person who's walking the beach, if they happen to fall, it's their own liability. And I have the copy right here.
I think right now your liability is, if they happen to be walking, your liability is higher than if you make it an easement.
And also, will there be new deeds for the people?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, our deeds say we owe to the mean.
And you still own to mean low tide.
Yeah.
It
It
doesn't
doesn't change
their
the owner
ownership.
rights. It doesn't change the owner's right.
If somebody gets hurt, or, you know, you've been there the 4th of July, the night before the 4th. It's mayhem.
Right, but the thing is, it's mayhem now, and the thing is, if somebody gets hurt now, you're in probably a worse situation than if you open up it as an easement to the public. What Nancy's saying is that when you sign an easement and open this all up to the public, basically what the state law says is that you're no longer liable for anybody, if the person is taking responsibility because they're using the open space that is allowed as public land. So they're using open space, it's now their responsibility. Right now, because it's your private land and you didn't kick them off and they get hurt, actually you do have liability now. This would actually relieve you of that liability.
Unless it's your party.
Unless it's your party.
Very well, and we want to make sure the kids don't go in on this.
I'll let you pick and choose who.
It seems that there's a couple of common issues that all of us have, and then obviously there's some specific issues. One of the common issues obviously is easement. It's been discussed ad nauseum to this point. But the other common issue is the dune and the height and the restricted vision and all that kind of stuff. If there's this 540 rule, which is an X and a Y, and if there's a concern about the height, why not lower the height by a foot and change the width of the dune?
It can be done. I think the issue, and this goes to, and again, this would have to work its way through permitting. It might end up being lower, it might be, but that height and the way it was determined was trying to minimize the footprint of it on the beach with appropriate slopes. And so one of the things when you go into permitting is you're trying to, quote unquote, minimize your environmental impact. So we're covering over shellfish resources, et cetera, when we're doing this. And so one of the things we're going to be asked is how did we minimize the footprint? And one of the ways of doing that is might be getting a little bit of extra height. It's possible maybe that we can go down a foot, but the one thing I do want to point out is you saw what happens that dune gets kicked up when you do have a major storm and you do get that spikes, and you're going to see that by a series of storms, you're going to see little spikes coming up the face of the dune as that, and you see that in the winter now. It may get kicked up a little bit higher than whatever we place it at, but that doesn't mean it can't be pushed back down to that height. And there might be an opportunity to make it a little bit lower, but again, the volume is critical, but we can't make it much lower because we did, besides the 540 rule, Rebecca also ran some wave run-up calculations to show that during certain different events that the waves wouldn't run up and over.
But this appears to be, from what I can hear, one of the two major common stumbling blocks, easement and so, with all due respect to the repercussions of lowering it by a foot, that might get a lot more people to agree on what we're looking for if we're not impacted by having a beautiful house and looking at cobble.
Thanks, Al. One of the issues that they're having, or that they would have with that, is he may say, yes, that's great, we'll design it for that, but then when it goes into the permitting phase, they're going to require him to tighten it up and go up to the height that he is, just because of the effect on the shellfish beds or anything to that effect. So he's trying to put it out there. They may even say go wider, but chances are they'd say go higher, if anything. And he picked the highest solution, elevation.
Right, so we try to pick something that we think is going to be permittable. It's possible that we might be able to modify it lower, but the thing is, I don't want to say that we definitely could.
It's like a worst case scenario is what you're proposing?
Yes. I can certainly justify them not forcing me to go higher. Let's put it that way. I can justify that.
I'm going to let John pick. Go ahead, John.
I'm going to take you in the back there. Go ahead, yes.
Two-part question. If the road is elevated and the yards have some kind of a fill to access our parking areas, does that go across the entire width of our property? And what is the material that's done with?
The plan would not be to fill the entire thing. We'd probably try to get your parking area, whatever that is.
That is the width.
Well, if it is the width, then it would be the whole width. Okay, it depends on what's there now. So we'd be trying to replicate what's there now. What it would be is basically you saw the roadway base that we would be doing for the road. And so it would be something similar to that. So you would be looking at having, if you're not a paved driveway now, we would not pave it. If you are a paved driveway now, we would pave it more like a road. But so we would probably try to replicate what's there. The one thing I will say is the regulatory agencies, if it's permeable surface now, not paved, they would frown on making more impermeable surface. But if you are paved now, they will probably let you get away with remaining paved. I would suggest, to make your life easy, if you can go away from pavement, that it would make life easier, but it is what it is.
And if the easements are not obtained for the dune, would the elevation still happen, or is it a one-shot deal for both?
As I mentioned, it's really not worth doing one without the other. So I think that really what it comes down to is trying to get both.
Why we want to phase it in and begin in one section is so that we can do both at the same time, where it's the most easiest and the most vulnerable. We don't want to put a dune out, we don't want to elevate the road and not put a dune out in front that would protect that area out in front, because then we're just making you the frontal dune, and as you know, the frontal dune is going to get hit, and we're not going to do that.
And the roadway, I think that the issue is that if we're elevating the roadway, and if we elevate the roadway and we don't do the dune, one of the things is what we're doing is we're creating kind of a dam that would potentially flood your property. So that's the last thing we want to do. We're trying to protect you from both sides. Wow, that engendered a lot of questions. Wow. Go ahead.
All right,
Hang on a second. I'm going to get him in front of you first, because he's had his hand up. Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
I'd like to go back to wave attenuating devices for a second, please. I read your response to Nancy's request for why those did not recommend WADs for this project. One of the citations that you mentioned was written by Scott Douglas et al., and they were dealing with a Mexican, Sea of Mexico restoration and protection project, where they used and evaluated what they call WADs, what I'm going to call living shoreline solutions WADs, because there was a difference. Their WADs that they used were square, they had round holes only on 2 or 3 sides, whereas the living shorelines WADs were 3-sided and had holes on all sides. And in the course of the text, the Douglas people said that there were times when, because of the type of WADs that they were evaluating, square, that the wave that actually moved through the WADs was greater in height than the entering waves. And I can understand why you would use that kind of information to make a no recommendation. But I have a video, a wave tank video, that has waves that are 25% higher than the scaled models in use. And as those waves pass through the WADs, the living shorelines WADs, what comes out the other side is a flat ocean, which automatically means that you're either going to eliminate or dramatically reduce any shoreline damage. And then the second issue is that if WADs could be proved to be successful, and I have plenty of evidence to indicate that they would, because they'd be put in the water, there is no question about easements as far as I know.
Okay. Well, let me take the last point first. I would agree there's no issue about easements with WADs. On the second note, I mean, I don't want to get into a huge technical discussion about WADs. I mean, they are what they are. I mean, they are, whether they're 3-sided or 4-sided, isn't irrelevant. It's just a different type of structure. I think Alan actually did use living shoreline stuff in his things, and I've talked to him. So
I've seen pictures. It's square.
Well, you're talking about Douglas. I'm talking about Alan's thesis. He actually used. Possibly, but when I talked to him, he was talking about using living shoreline solution stuff. So if he had done that, then he's, maybe he's not being honest with me. But I will say that is something have looked at, and I don't want to limit it to living shorelines, whether it be Pep Reefs, Breakwaters International, the ones that were used in Mexico, WADS, Living Shoreline Solutions, they all are a different type of structure, and they all do similar type things. I mean, they're blocking a certain portion of the water column, and they're going to have an effect. What we're just saying is the effect is quite limited in this case. And we go on from there. Go ahead.
He's our timer.
Yeah, he's telling me I don't have much time.
No, you got 28 minutes. I'm going to pivot a little bit. It's come up at the Coastal Advisory Commission meeting and a little bit here. And while we have the police department here, thank you, Chief, and others for coming. Along Central Avenue, it's been commented several concerns that if easements are given, and even if easements aren't given, there's a lot of what people perceive as illegal parking, inappropriate parking, people parking where they want and then just going out to the beach wherever they do it. So irrespective of this project, short term, and recognize that in fact the sawhorses and the barriers were put up at the end, at the northern point this last weekend, so thank you. Is there a way to, one, maybe create better signage short-term along Central Avenue and or responsiveness to when we call to get cars towed, ticketed, what have you, and if that happens, people will stop parking there, frankly.
I spoke with Mike Green from the Highway Department last week about replacing a lot of the signs. The signs are missing, they're old, they're worn, and they just don't get the attention that we need them to. So I've told him to anticipate a request from me for 15 additional signs, and it's starting from where the cobble has gone into the marsh, because we can't have parking. It's not going to be allowed because it's abutting Central Ave, but even further in, it's, the environmental total impact of it. So we're not going to allow it there. We have started, if cars were parked there last week, it wasn't much of a beach weekend last weekend, but it's going to start getting the attention that it needs, and, Central Ave and even down River Street, we got to start paying a lot more attention to the signage down there because it's just not adequate.
Thank you.
This is an awful lot of money, and more than likely it will be phased as opposed to built out all as one project. How do you see that happening, and can that be done effectively?
It can be done effectively. We're looking at, I guess it's about $3.6 million for that first phase, and it's probably would end up being probably over 4 with all the driveways, et cetera. I think that a lot of that depends on the way it's funded. The town's had success with dam and seawall funds, getting those from the state, which some of it can be low interest loans, and some of it is actually a grant. So you can certainly phase those in if the funding is potential. You have the possibility.
But then can they progressively be done?
It can certainly progressively be done. It's beach nourishment. You want to really do a large stretch all at once. But with the dune nourishment, because we're really looking at something that's in the upper part of the beach and just dealing with overtopping, it's something that generally moves cross shore, and there's not a lot of longshore transport. So you're not losing the material to a down to earth beach. It's just more overwash. So yes, you could build it in segments, but you certainly would not want to have a 300-foot segment. You'd want to do somewhere like 1,000 feet plus.
I'd just like to add to that as well. In Scituate, you already have a berm on Musquashka Pond that was man-made back after the blizzard of 1978 when that breached. And so that is monitored and maintained by the DPW and the engineering department. We roughly estimate it to be about 18-foot elevation, and we went in for a reimbursement to reconstruct it because it moves back. We want to put it back up to the height that it should be at, and we asked for FEMA reimbursement for that. So when something has been established and we have monitored and maintained it, then when a storm comes through, we can add that to our FEMA reimbursement funds when that should
And I
happen.
should point that out, so that's not for construction, but that is for maintenance. So as long as it's an engineered, maintained structure, and beach nourishment or dune nourishment counts as that, you can actually ask for FEMA reimbursement.
And we saw that, they repaired that section by Man Hill last year, Kevin?
Yes.
Anybody else? I'll grab you back there, yes, go ahead.
Let's assume the project goes through, and you had said during the presentation, as long as it doesn't fail. You mentioned the wall, the berm could fail.
Right.
So for it to go through, we have to sign an easement. Now, if it fails, and it doesn't work, is that a lifetime easement, or is the easement done?
And what do you mean by fail?
Well, you mentioned that the berm could possibly, if you
But the berm could breach in a certain location if it's not maintained all that well, certainly.
Yeah.
But I think from an easement standpoint, if, like a nourishment easement, if the berm was completely gone and demonstrated to be gone, your easement disappears. So your easement is based on that material being there, that volume above the beach being there. If that is no longer there, if it returns to where it is now, you no longer have an easement.
But as this area is as vulnerable as it is, and it is thin and low, we can only walk. So, hang on. It is as low as it is that we are, just like we do at Musquashka Pond, we maintain and monitor it after a storm. We do it the whole coast. The engineering department and DPW and myself and others go out and walk the entire coastline and review all of the seawalls, all of the infrastructure that we have in place that protect your property as well as our infrastructure to make sure that we're documenting it. In fact, I go out before a storm and take pictures of what it looks like the day before the storm hits, so that I have that documentation for FEMA when they come to review our files. And I tell you, the exhaustive work that's done by Dan Smith and the engineering and DPW department is hats off to them for all the work that they do in order to maintain all the documentation necessary to get that reimbursement. So we do take care and we do watch when things like that happen. So if there was a breach, if there was in between, then we will take care of those measures in order to protect not only your private structures as well as our public infrastructure.
Go ahead.
So do I understand that once the easement is signed and the dune is built, that will be monitored and maintained?
That's the intent, to continue to do that, because what would be the alternative? If we let it go, then you go back to where you are now, and then we go back to repaving the road and clearing it after every storm, and then we have no access to people who are up on Fourth Cliff. I mean, it's right now, it's an accident.
Hang on a second.
Just to follow up, because I think that's the assurance that some people need here.
Right.
Is that you're signing a permanent easement, not a conditional easement. It isn't worded that way.
Right.
So if you sign a permanent easement,
right,
is the town saying that it will be monitored and maintained?
I can't speak for the selectman or the town administrator, but I can tell you what we do on all other sections of the community, and I have no reason to believe that if we make the commitment to build it, we will make the commitment to monitor and maintain it. But again, I can't speak for the selectmen.
And I will say, as part of permitting, we would be required to monitor it. So that is certainly, through that permitting process, the whole process is, when you do have a project that has impacts like this project would have, hence why the permitting is difficult, that the requirement is to make sure you're monitoring it because they want it to be successful, because they've made a commitment to allow you to have that impact. And part of that is to certainly monitor it. And I do want to point out, and I know I've already said it, but the way that, and for those of you who don't live here all year round and are in some other state, if you go down to Florida or any of those states, a lot of their reimbursement for renourishment comes from FEMA when they have a hurricane or a storm. They've monitored and maintained those beach nourishments, and because they're engineered beach nourishments, they get 100% funded to renourish their beach. So as long as you're doing that, and that's what this system is made to be, and that's the way that the town views it, you can have, basically, if you have a named storm that damages this system, you get reimbursed from FEMA just like a seawall, just like a revetment, to rebuild it and back up to the engineering standards that it was built to. Boy, that generated a lot of questions. I love it. Go ahead again.
Okay, I just want to be clear. So by signing this easement,
I'm going to talk to her. I'm not going to say anything.
By signing the easement, we're not only allowing unfettered access to the beach in front of our house, but we're also giving carte blanche to build this dune to whatever height is determined that's going to get passed and permitted. And so we're not going to be sure that beautiful sea view is going to be lost.
So
it's a two-in-one deal here, isn't it?
Well, keep in mind, as I mentioned, and some of you came in after I started, we're still at the very high level of design. We're at conceptual.
Still need the easement signed first, though.
Well, I need the easements for a variety of different reasons, but if I need the money to do the rest of this project.
Is that going to trigger basically, like I said, allow you the next phase to go and present the dune nourishment, et cetera, with whatever height is determined, and basically we won't know. Each individual house obviously has different situations. We won't know if that view is going to be restricted or not after having signed the easement. And we've lost all control.
When is your timing for getting easements?
I don't have a set deadline. As I mentioned, I put in an application or a proposal for more grant funding for $270,000 in order to do the actual engineering. So then we will have more detailed studies. But as you know, we're also doing the South River Dredge project. I need a place to put that. And I believe for myself, what I'm going to do with that is first come, first serve. If you've signed an easement and I have a stretch of people, a stretch of properties that have already signed, they're going to get it first. Anywhere along that beach, as long as you're within 2,600 linear feet, which what my consultant said I need, but I think I can kind of squeeze that a little bit more if I need to. But as I keep going forth and asking for grant money, I have to show good faith that the residents of this area are in support. And by signing an easement shows you're in support and that you would like to have something happen. We will have another opportunity to have meetings. My office is in the basement of the town hall. If anyone ever has any questions or want to see the designs or see where we're at, you can contact me, email, telephone, and come see me in person. I'm available throughout anytime, Monday.
So
They would get legal notices as part of the notice of intent process.
Right. I'd like to point out, that, so as I said, the permitting process is a very long process. And so, one of the things we're trying to do over the next year is trying to get this thing engineering permitted. But the permitting process also comes with public notice to everyone who is an affected person. So all of you guys as homeowners would get a notice for public meetings associated with the permitting process. And that is you saw the long list of permits. Every time there's a permit application, you guys would get noticed, and you could say, I can't have the design over 18.5 feet because that's impeding my view. And that goes into the whole process of, because it's not just a one-sided that the regulators are going to dictate a certain height. There's also a public process. If that is creating a hardship or a problem, and certainly I will say the agencies would prefer a solution like this because seawalls are basically verboten on barrier beaches. So they would prefer to see a solution like this, and working with everybody to make that happen, I think they would try to do that. At the same time, they're also going to try to minimize their footprint. So it is a little bit of back and forth, but certainly there is a public process. And I think that basically, I don't know exactly when Nancy needs easements from a town selectman type standpoint, but certainly before we're finished with the permitting process, you probably want to have all your easements in place so that once you have the permits in hand, you have the ability to go immediately for funding, construction funding. So I don't know exactly what the timing is. It's not like Nancy needs them this week, but certainly it's something, as the permitting process is going on, if you have very big concerns, bring them up, and hopefully the project can be molded, and that would be the time to kind of work out the last details of the easements, if that makes sense.
Knowing that this area has a wide variety of local residents as well as those who use this property maybe as rental and aren't here throughout any major portion of the year, then sometimes it's best to contact me if you're not around at all. But if you're local, we'll probably try to hold a couple of public meetings, during the summertime when we know most of the people are around, but we understand how difficult it is to reach every homeowner on this stretch because of the varieties of different ownerships. But we're going to do...
The way you send the tax bills.
I did send everything, all the information that I had through mail. Some of them came back. New owners come in and go on this area. So we're going to do the best we can to continue to work with residents. Again, if you can't attend the public meetings, then I suggest you continually stay in touch with me so I can keep you informed as to where we are at in the process. Because that I'm hoping that we get the dredge permit sometime in the fall, I will need those permits before I can do much more. So, what did I say? Permits? Yeah, I need those too.
Yeah,
but
permits and
I can't do much further along than the fall. So I will be looking for some kind of deadline sometime in the fall, but I have to talk to my consultant from the dredge project.
Actually, go all the way in the back. Since
Is the size of the dune here what you're going to submit to try to get a permit for? What I'm asking is, what I know about the height of the dune, I was taught ask for more than what you want. So why right? So why don't you lower 3 feet, spread it out a little bit into the ocean a little bit more, and when they come back and say no, then say, look, we'll raise it up a foot or a foot and a half, and it won't end up as high as it is right now.
There's a lot of games that you can play, but to be honest with you, the way this is designed, this is the design that is, again, most appropriate. If I want to lower it a few feet and play with those numbers and see what it's going to do, I can say that more overtopping is going to occur, and then we have to start playing that game. If we're talking about lowering it a foot, that might be something that's within the realm and widening the crest a little bit. But again, I don't want to get into the point of trying to, again, making this wide, flat dune. Now we're looking at kind of a nourishment. We're going to start getting wave overtopping that's going to make this so it doesn't function the way we want to make it function.
And since you're doing a road over, did anybody talk about putting sewer down the road?
I think you have to go to Marshfield for your sewer line. You say, that might be a tough negotiation, but I'm not going to get into that. At least not right now. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I just that could be a nightmare in its
No one has even thought about it.
It wasn't right now, no. But it might solve a lot of other problems. Go ahead.
A couple of questions. Now, the town planner, when she came here, she was wanting to run a shuttle bus from the parking lot to the old Coast Guard station. Also, you know where that is?
The old Coast Guard
town could make some money having a shuttle bus charging parking there. Another question is, I think that, Hatch's old gunning stand, I think there's a right way to the beach down there. Also, if we lose the banking, do we have a guarantee the town is going to keep nourishing and maintain it to its height? Signing this paper reminds me of, what's her name from the West Coast? I can't, it's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, she says, you won't know what you're signing until you sign.
Your Nancy Pelosi thing, okay.
And I'm beginning
well, that hurts me.
You know what you sign until it's all over and then you're stuck.
The thing is, I think the one thing, and working with towns in the state, I think the one thing, unless FEMA changes the way they do things, obviously the town's going to maintain it. I think the difficulty comes in, if the sea level rises as much as some of the scary types of predictions say, there's going to be a lot of screaming and trying to keep every little beach community alive, and it's very difficult to do that. So I think at some point this may be unsustainable, but I think right now the way that FEMA's set up and the way things are, yes, it's something that the town can easily maintain. If it all falls on the town's shoulders to foot the whole bill, no, that's not going to work. So I think that as long as, again, we can only live in the world that we have, and the way it's set up now is if you build this and it's damaged and it's an engineered project and you've monitored and maintained it, you're going to get reimbursed. And that, therefore, because they're looking at it, as long as you guys have FEMA flood insurance, they're looking at it as a long-term reduction in flood damages and something that's beneficial to the country, because FEMA's in the red, as we well know.
The gray shirt, and that gentleman had a question too. So I don't know, the gray sweatshirt, and then that gentleman over there has raised his hand a bunch of times as well, so. Go ahead.
If I
I'm
may,
calling.
There's a line in the easement that troubles me, and
Okay.
it's what we've just been talking about. It all sounds good, what you're saying, you'll maintain it and so on. But you're very clear that it says the rights hereby reserved and granted authorized, but do not impose any obligation upon the town to maintain or otherwise perform any act relative to the easement area, including doing it. So once we've given you an easement and it's recorded forever. And then if you don't get the money and get it funded, we still have an easement out there that we can't get back, and there's nothing here obligating you to even do raising the road in the first place. So when does this get recorded? And
It would get recorded when we do the project and not until. So if your project was in the first phase, that would be done first. And we would require the easement then. As you probably realize, I am not the legal mind in this. I sent a draft easement to legal counsel, and legal counsel then completes the easement for the town. So he put in the language for the town. So that's again...
But that language is contrary to what we're hearing. That's the only thing that worries me when I read
That's a
this.
problem. I mean, if they're saying right in the easement that the town is not obligated to maintain it, I mean...
Right, all I can say is that while we do continue to do the same, so I'm going to go back to the Musquashkett berm project. In 1978, when that breached, that was owned privately. In fact, we didn't attain ownership of that berm until 2 years ago? A year ago?
3 or 4 years ago.
3 or 4 years ago. And we continued to maintain it even though we didn't even own it, because it protected homeowners behind that area. Because of the breach, it made a huge impact on the community at that time, and they made the decision to do so. We know that the area with which you live and the most vulnerable spots need to be addressed. I can't make a commitment beyond what I'm telling you. That's at a higher, obviously...
At the very least, town council has to make it clear that
Right.
these don't get recorded unless the doing gets done, because that statement says the opposite.
Right. So
And I know I wouldn't sign that if that's the way it comes down and I read it.
I will discuss, that, go back and discuss it with them, but I will probably be the one that instruments the beginning of taking that and recording it. In fact, I'll probably be the one who's actually physically going to record it. So I would know when that would be the most appropriate time. And I would not record it. I would hold...
The wording needs to be changed to get people, I think, to sign it in the first place.
Okay. I will
So
take
that they know
I will
that-
take a look at it, and I will discuss with the town.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, I made a number of revisions, and I understand that there's a certain leap of faith here, but the prior speaker is exactly right. I mean, and I brought it up before, that it expressly says the opposite. So I think that, in all fairness to everybody who wants to cooperate here, we need to have a sentence in there that says, notwithstanding the foregoing, in the event that it is not monitored and maintained, that the easement will be null and void, only because folks have financing and they have title issues. So I think we all want to, participate and get this done and get this moving. But I think there's got to be some reasonableness whereby that sentence that says expressly the opposite of monitor and maintained is addressed some other way.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out, and I'll do what I can.
A couple of points. Would it be fair to say that this project is designed, it only works if it's maintained, correct? And then you're taking all the effort that's going into, and Kevin can probably answer this better, all the effort that now goes into maintaining Central Avenue can be done maintaining the berm on the beach side.
Well, hopefully with a little bit less effort.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, maintenance-wise, from my standpoint, I don't live on the beach, okay, and so I'm not signing an easement or any of that type of thing. There's a I think there's evidence of a commitment of the town ready to go ahead and do something. And also in the permits that are going to be issued, for one, a Conservation Commission permit, which will be recorded on the deeds, maintenance is going to be mandatory. You know, so there's other things going on. I think it's really neat, the whole permitting thing and how those conditions are going to work should really be explained to everyone, so that...
Right, and it's hard right now to, because we're not in permitting, but certainly as we go into permitting, anytime we're doing sort of dune projects or beach nourishment projects, there's typically a monitoring and maintenance requirement. But yeah, we are down to the last couple of minutes, so I'd like to maybe just get the two questions here and finish that. Samantha?
Yeah, I'm great. So I work with the North and South Rivers Watershed Association, and we're concerned with water quality in the South River. And so I wanted to hear if you guys had thought about what your plans might be for stormwater capture and treatment, whether there's something innovative we could do, and the septic systems. If there are some problems, is there any way they can be part of this project?
I think that the septic systems are probably a little bit beyond. In the stormwater issue, I think right now, a lot of the stormwater issue is water going over the beach. So, the beach infiltrates a lot of water, or can infiltrate a lot of water, and can be a good filter itself from at least rainwater and those types of things. But it's, I think, taking away some of the overwater. It's taking, I'm thinking of Crescent Beach because we just had a video during the storm where we were watching a video monitor come across the beach, floating across the beach. I don't know if somebody had it sitting out in their side yard or something, but that type of garbage that goes into the river. I think a lot of the overwash of oils and those types of things coming off the road would be reduced tremendously just by the project itself. But we're not trying to put in like BMPs or anything along the road to try to, particle separators, because I think that the leaching and the kind of...
So there's not going to be any stormwater, or...
That's not the intent is not to do that, just because we're trying to not encroach on the barrier beach any more than we absolutely have to.
Porous asphalt, have you thought about that? You're going to raise it up, you're going to have a bed underneath it, several feet. If you had drainage underneath it, you could have the water go through the asphalt.
I'm not an asphalt expert. I know that permeable pavement is something that definitely has a much shorter life than regular pavement. So again, it does end up having issues.
It requires a lot of maintenance.
Yeah.
But Kevin, you can, from a Conservation Commission standpoint, whenever the DPW has done road improvements in the town of Scituate, and come to the commission for permission to do that, part of our request is that they add additional protection in the form, if there's drainage that comes off the road or whatever, that those get at least some treatment.
We can look at it. I think one of the issues here is because it's a permeable barrier beach, it's a little bit different.
I'm thinking about the road surface. There's areas, if the road is elevated.
To actually put something in the roadway itself.
Yes.
That's a possibility. We certainly can look into it. But I wouldn't, on the side drainage.
No, I don't see how that's going to be very effective, but for the road surface itself, we have those things.
You're going to have a pretty steep slope off of that road into the marsh.
Hopefully not.
Where you're close, right?
In some places, it is going to be pretty narrow. Right, right. And maybe in some of those places, we may slope it the other way, where it's not a crown, but it's slope going back towards the other side. So, there are different ways of dealing with it.
So you're saying slope it towards the homeowner's house rather than towards the marsh?
Not at all. It'd be the same breakdown that he had up there earlier on the profile, where it pitches off in each direction.
Yeah, so, but your area is permeable, so we can look at some drainage in the roadway itself. I just don't think there's a lot to be gained, but it's something to look at. Just me.
And there could be some large cost implications too, the more we keep adding to it.
Right. But certainly cost is an issue. But we certainly can look at that. If you're raising the roadway, if I'm only raising the roadway a little bit, I probably wouldn't do something, but if in these areas where it's 3 feet, it certainly might be worth doing.
Sam, I absolutely see where you're coming from on this, but at an astronomically high tide and very little wind or fetch, it's over the road now. It's already sometimes just completely all water. So whatever is happening out there is worse now than anything that we can do to make improvements.
I'm asking you to make it better, I'm not
Right.
asking you.
No, I'm just saying that all of the soup that you're talking about that gets out
No, I'm
there.
talking about when it rains, and you're gonna have water hitting that pavement.
Right.
We've got stormwater pollution issues in the river already.
Right.
And so anytime we can stop stormwater from getting into the
Absolutely.
river and putting it back in the ground and treating it, that's less pollution in the river and more
Absolutely.
opportunities for us to maybe improve the water quality that does not meet standards. So, I'm
Fair
asking
enough.
about the stormwater.
Absolutely. I just wanted to kind of give you a current
Yeah, it was
conditions
like that.
is kind of, it's off the walls and off the charts with all of,
Very much.
there were, I think, P's and G's in the peach. Had their hands up first, and then you can take them as wish, and then we got to
Okay,
wrap it up. So,
you point.
go ahead.
Well, okay, not to be, I'm not trying to be entirely comical here, but is there easements and height of the dune notwithstanding, is there any kind of an office pool going at the town hall as to how long Humarock will last if they don't do anything?
No, but
You
maybe
you can start
we could.
one, you can start the office pool. I don't think there's anything in town hall, but I'm not at town hall.
It's
so-
just that some of us have been here for 65, 70 years, every seasonally, and it's going. I mean, I can see where I am. There's nothing left out there. North Scituate used to have a beautiful beach back in 1950. Nantasket, I was a kid at Nantasket. I mean, they had a there's no beach at high tide anymore.
Right, I understand.
Like
That's-
North Scituate.
But then we're talking about this, we talked about the seawalls. Both seawalls, right?
I get that,
Yeah.
and I'm not an engineer, and this has been very informative to see the impact and the mechanics of the ocean and the wall's effect. And I mean, I think the big picture is something has to be done, and the gentleman is right. I mean, I don't think the language should be dictated by some, town clerk who thinks he's a lawyer. Somewhere along the line, this process, if you want cooperation, has got to have some honest give and take. Now, I've met Nancy before, and I found she's really a good employee, trying to be on the people's side. And she's never come off to me as autocratic or her rules or no rules. And I just think a lot of points have been made that some concern me, some don't concern me, and I'm sure we all have varying degrees of that with elements of this. But at some point, it's a long process, and I think in good faith, you have to take these comments back and get these things reworded so it's palatable, and then someone has to sell it seems to me, because it's going to go. I mean,
And you know what, on that same token, it's come a long way, and Nancy's worked really, really hard on getting it this far along.
but I'm saying, that's going to breach, and even where I am, I'm down at the halfway point. There's nothing left. There's nothing left. And all these houses in front of us on pilings, I mean, it's all coming. And the residue is not going back, for the most part. The homeowners are not, there might be some exceptions, don't get me wrong, particularly way down towards the cliff. But most of that stuff that's coming over on the road is not going back on the beach. From maybe 180 down, maybe beyond 180 a lot, because the people there are doing it. But the rest of it, further down,
A lot of it ends up on the overwash. bed. Yep.
it's leaving town.
Yep.
So it's going, so something has to be done. And, it has to be palatable, and it has to be workable.
Okay. I'm going to let you decide, because I just said the last two, and then we're going to have to wrap it up.
I'd just like to ask everybody to put yourselves in the shoes of the homes that are at the low point, right? The gentleman that just left had a seawall in front of his house. Some other people are worried about visibility. If you're at the low point of the road, folks, your days are numbered. And for the rest, and I'm not at the low point, I'm at elevation 9.5. I'm adding, you know, a tenth of a foot to my driveway, so I don't have a horse in that race. But put yourself at elevation 7, and you have all of your neighbors, you know, complaining about the fine print and easements, in which a town is offering to spend $97,000 per house to help you save your house. And we're worried about the fine print, with all due respect, people. And we're worried about the view. There is no view if you don't have a house. Okay? Okay. That's all I've got to say. Put yourself at elevation 7. And, you know.
Very brave of you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
One of the problems we have is when they put the houses on pilings, they graded off so they could drive the piling down plumb.
Yep.
They never put the elevation back to the berm.
I think there's certainly been a lot of that that's gone on, of regrading and various things, yeah.
So then,
Thank you for coming. I will work on that.
the berm wasn't as
Thank you.
hard as originally, and with the pilings that ran through, the people complained about the rocks being pushed up against their houses when the town cleared the street. So the town came down with them bulldozers with a straight blade and pushed it into the ocean. And then you could drive down the street and be level with the ocean. I didn't go to MIT, but I did go to Humarock University.
That's fair enough. I agree with you.
I know for homeowners, residents we need to hear from, so I'd just like to, the peach.
Just a quick curiosity, is that when we did the sacrificial dune that you made mention of earlier? And that was meant to be a sacrificial dune, it was not meant to be what you're talking about. But we then signed construction easements. More than that was never required. What has changed?
I don't know when the rules changed. Maybe Rebecca could follow up on that, but I do know now that in order for me to acquire a DEP permit and Army Corps permits, I need to have a public benefit for the public funds that are going towards it. My guess is maybe people who don't get that benefit have complained at some point in time, and then the rules changed. I just know that's the rules.
Would they still complain if there's no parking and they can't access the beach?
I don't understand the question.
If the public is complaining about public funds being used for private benefit, so you're going to be making those beaches
So
public?
what I just said was a complete assumption. I really don't know when the rules changed.
You're saying that the public would then have the benefit of the beach, but there is no parking for the public, so how are they getting a benefit? How would that be justified?
I guess that's more a benefit for you than it is for anybody else, because in order for me to get this project done, I need the easement. So I'm telling you the truth, there is no parking.
Would it have to go in front of town meeting to be approved?
It will. Because we're going to need funding at...
Access the beach?
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't the residents then complain that they can't access the beach because of parking?
There's just no feasible way to create parking on Central Ave. We wouldn't...
I don't want parking on it.
Right, so there is no feasible way to make safe parking on Central Ave. We have parking on Humarock. That is going to be sufficient.
But you're right, it could go to town meeting and people may vote against it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
You know, and if that's the case, the whole project gets scrubbed, there's no easements or anything else, so that's always a possibility.
Easement are recorded as an easement, absolutely.
We won't record it because if we don't...
Fully permitted, ready for construction.
Until we...
Guaranteeing me?
you know, I work for the town of Scituate. I don't make all the decisions, but I'm telling you that in these cases, we're not going to record the easement until we have the funding to move forward with construction. But I need in good faith, hang on. In good faith, I need either a signed notice of intent or a signed easement to show the permitting agencies that I have the full support of the residents on Humarock and that we have a public benefit, but it will not be recorded until we have the ability to pay for the project. If indeed the town decides we don't want to pay for this project, those will never be recorded.
Two things you just said that I want to comment on. The first is, you just put another facet in here that we can do a notice of intent
I haven't,
for an easement?
it's the same,
No, that's not the same.
Well, you have to understand what she means by notice of intent, so hang on a second.
No, I'm just wanting to be clear here. I'm very uncomfortable signing something for this town without getting any guarantee I'm getting anything back for it. I'm getting no guarantees, I'm getting promises.
I'm not
asking you, that's not my point. Or you tell me if the notice of intent to be signed, that I will sign a permit, and that's sufficient to go forward, and I find out someday you have enough money, and you're going to do it, I might be okay with that. But I'm not going to sign my life away today on a promise that I may never see. Second point, I still don't understand the argument. The town gets millions of dollars worth of real estate taxes. You know, the base up there, the town wouldn't have to clear the road if they do the project on the beach. You can't tell me there's not a public benefit to doing the project without an easement. Because it costs this town how much money to clear the road every storm?
Can vary depending on the storm.
A lot of money. Okay, so don't tell me there's no public benefit for doing the project without the easement. That we only benefit from that. That's not true. The town does benefit. Taxes, less expense.
Thank you.
We're a cash cow.
Well, if there's no other questions, I want to just thank everybody for taking the time. Did you have a question?
No, I just want to talk to you.
Okay.
That's my eldest. Very photogenic.
Thank you all for coming. I really do appreciate the time.